Hey, welcome back. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces today. And whenever I start planning out a composition just refers to total overall layout of the page. Where is everything going to be? I want to think about foreground, middle ground, and background. All right, so this is a really great start, but it's nowhere close to finished. One of the things that I mentioned was foreground, background, and middle ground. And I have not done anything to create that here, except for thinking about size. The sun is obviously far, far away because otherwise it would fill up the whole page, right? I mean, the sun is ginormous. It looks small because it's far away, right? So comparatively, the rocket is closer than the sun. But how could I show that in more than just size? We don't have a horizon here because we're not talking about, a landscape on a planet. We've talked before about how the horizon is only there because Earth is round. But we're not on a planet here. We're not on Earth, so there is no horizon. So I can't use the horizon as a guide for how close or far away things are, which means I'm going to have to limit myself to size and overlapping. So I've done some things with size here to make this be the closest and this be farther away and the sun be even farther, but some overlapping will help make that even more apparent. So I'm going to start adding some other objects that'll just help to create that sense of overlapping. I don't want these to be super important parts of the picture. So I'm going to go with darker colors that don't show up as brightly, like brown. Maybe I want to make an asteroid that's kind of behind the rocket but in front of the comet or something like that. And sure, I'll just do that right here. And I want to keep my overall composition of these three objects being the most important and keeping this very diagonal look. Your composition might look completely different, but this was my basic composition, so I want to keep that thought, and I want these other things to kind of work with that. Alrighty, so what I've done here is kind of created an asteroid field in the foreground here that my rocket is going through. Behind that is this comet. Behind that is this planet rotating, revolving around the sun. And I've mixed three colors together. I got these two different browns and this gray to make those objects happen. I wanted the planet to be a little bit different from the asteroids, but still a rocky brown mess of a planet. So it's a little bit more gray. And that kind of gave a little bit of tonality in terms of highlights and shadows, but I do want to go back and use the yellow for some real rich highlights, just like I did. Actually, just because of the color of these objects, I think an orange or a red, I'm going to use the red-orange for highlights. I think that will actually, maybe the regular orange instead of the red-orange will be bright enough. Because these have a sort of reddish tone to them. So I think orange highlights might might work a little better than the yellow. So you don't have to use the same color for highlights throughout the whole picture. You can pick and choose based on the objects that you're highlighting and shadowing, and that can help to add some variety and some tonality to your picture to make it more interesting. It can add some contrast too. This orange really contrasts against that blue, so that helps things to stand out a little bit more. And with this, I'm thinking about this planet here. It's really backlit by the sun. It's kind of in front. The sun is shining on the back of it, not the front of it. So it's going to be mostly shadowed. So I think I'm going to use this real deep blue, maybe? Yeah, let's use this real deep blue for the shadows. It's going to be mostly shadow. And that's, with this deep, deep blue, that's going to make it real hard to see. So I do want to go back with this brown and blend it with that. Because on this black paper, and you know what, maybe it needs to be hard to see. Maybe that's actually a good thing. Sometimes it's good to have certain parts of your picture that are more difficult, more difficult to make out. It gives some interesting depth to your picture. There will be things that people didn't see the first time they look at it, and then when they go back and look at it again, they'll see new things. I am going to give just a rim light, just a nice little orange line around that edge to help it pop. And I really like the way that blue turned out, so I'm going to use that in the shadowed edge of these asteroids as well. It really almost makes them hide in space, which is kind of what I want, because these aren't part of the main event of the picture. They're sort of extras. And so I don't want them to stand out too much. So this is actually working ridiculously well. All right, so this is looking beautiful, but still not quite done. I've got to think about the fire coming out of this rocket. I've got to think about distant stars scattered throughout. And I need to at least consider the idea of having some outlines or things to help make certain areas pop. So I guess the next step is the fire here. I don't want it to overpower the picture, which is part of why I have it cropping off the bottom of the page. I didn't want it to be like the big deal where your eyes go straight to the fire. So I'm also not gonna make it like the most bright orange red kind of thing. I'm gonna let it stay more yellow, like all the other yellows that we've got throughout the picture. I think that's gonna help. And I'm also not gonna spend too much time worrying about getting rid of all these black dots. I'm not gonna push too hard and make it too vivid of a color. I'm gonna let it be a little bit more neutral. In fact, I'm even gonna go back in and add a little bit of brown to it. Now I know brown isn't a fiery color, but it'll neutralize the color a little bit and make it less powerful of a color. So it will not shine as much. That way we're not distracted by it too much. I could have done that with maybe some gray as well, or even black, but I think black would have been too dark. Okay, so now for distant stars, we want stars to be scattered all over the place, but what we don't want to do, we don't want to go tap, 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 tap randomly. I mean, that can sometimes create an okay look, but oftentimes what that ends up doing is you end up with little lines where your hand was moving while you were tapping, or you end up putting things in places where you don't want them. So what I want to do is kind of strategically plan out where my stars are going to be. And I'm gonna, I guess, I can use, think about star colors. You could use a yellow, you could use a white. Sometimes stars are pale blue. Sometimes stars are more red. Stars come in lots of different colors. And we can decide whether we want to use all of these colors or whether we just want them all to be white or all to be yellow. And we can make that decision visually. We don't have to make it realistically. So I'm looking here at this picture and thinking, primarily, my picture is all about these yellowy areas. Even this blue comet, the yellow is really what shines. So I might decide that I want all of my stars to be yellow because then that kind of brings it all together. Or I might decide, like I did with these asteroids and things, that I don't want them to be yellow because I want them to feel separate from. So that's really a choice you get to make as the artist, figuring out whether you want a certain part of your picture to be a unifying force or being a contrasting force. And I think what I'm going to do here is start with white. Partly because I think this white is overpowering. And if I have a little bit of white in other places, this won't be quite so overpowering. Although this is what I want the focus of the picture to be on, is this rocket going through this asteroid field. I want the eye to travel. I want the viewer's eyes to travel throughout the whole picture. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by thinking of ways that I can use these white stars to pull the eyes across the page. And so I'm going to actually start with kind of a dotted line. And that line kind of pulls your eyes from the rocket through the comet to the sun, and then kind of go from here to the asteroids, and then back to the rocket. So I've strategically placed out, now I didn't like make a dot line, just enough that if I left it like that, your eyes would follow those dotted lines. Now I also want to place in extras so that it doesn't look like I made this dotted line on purpose. So I'm gonna scatter some out, and I might make these original ones a little bigger, just so that you'll still get that effect visually without being, without realizing it, without seeing that. Anytime you can make a choice that affects the viewer's eyes without them knowing it, it really, what is art? You're creating a magic, you're creating an illusion. It's like a magic trick. Like you're up on a stage and you pulled a bunny out of a hat, and nobody knew the bunny was there, and now you know, oh wow, there's a bunny here. And it's like, well, now that I've scattered a whole bunch of stars around the whole page, you don't really see a line here, a line here, and a line here. You just see a bunch of scattered stars. But because these ones are a little bigger, they do have that effect of pulling your eye around as if it was a dotted line. Okay? So all those strategic choices coming together, making this picture look fantastic. I think I do want to make some of these stars a little bit more yellow. So I'm just going to go in and on a few of the distant stars, maybe just right on top of the white dots, kind of blend a little bit of yellow into them. I don't want to overdo this, but I think a little bit more tonality, a little bit more colorful is going to be good. Maybe some of them being a little bit blue too. I think this will help to kind of unify everything if I include some of these colors that are mixed throughout the whole page. And then I think some of these red will help unify with all the other little rockets, not rockets, rocks, asteroids. So I'm kind of, going around here and there. I think those red ones are a little too powerful, so I'm gonna blend them again with the white, just so that they're not quite so powerful. And there you go. The last question is there anything that I want to really make it pop with an outline? So far, I started with outlines, but when I colored things in, those outlines all disappeared. So you could do something like use a black. Now, a black on a black paper is not super high contrast, but it is visible if you're, especially if you're using it as an outline around different shapes. So like if I really want the focus to be here on this rocket, I could make a nice black outline around the whole rocket. In my case here, I don't think that's necessary, but sometimes it might be, depending on what you've drawn. That's a decision you gotta make. You could also make those outlines with other colors. Another way to make, if you really want something to stand out, like if I really wanted this, one of these asteroids to stand out, I could do a bright white outline, and that would really contrast it, push the contrast between that and the background, the black of space. So there's lots of ways you could go with outlines. I don't think this picture needs it. I think this picture is done. I think the only thing I have left is to sign it. And I'll sign it with a white right here. And I'm done. So what did we learn from this? We've talked about a lot of things through this project. One of them is starting with a composition. One of them is base colors. Starting with base colors and then adding more color to it as you go. We talked about shading chromatically with colorful shading, orange for highlights, blue for shadows, or yellow for highlights and purple for shadows. We talked about overlapping, creating space, creating three-dimensional distance in space, even without a horizon. We've talked about how to think about the way that light bounces off of some objects and travels through other objects. We've talked about a whole lot of things, and when you put all of those ideas together and you make wise choices, make thoughtful choices about your art as you go, you can end up with something really fantastic just by going one step at a time.